Alright, now it's time to go, like I said, to the mint where the vaults are built it for Sprocket. Ah.
Eh.
This is Fort Sprocket, the foundry where most of the galaxy's bolts are held. As you can imagine, security here is extremely tight, although our surveillance shows that the usual guards have been replaced by the Kingpin's men. This is the head goon. He's the one you knocked out at the science lab, remember? He's been seen in the area of the main vault. If you can stop him, you may be able to shut down the entire operation.
Oh, he's got a cigar in his mouth.
Okay, that's why he's evil, Dweebs. That's what you should know.
Of course.
You know, even though this is technically a re-release, I don't get why they weren't able to erase some of the lag during the cutscenes.
That's because they're pre-rendered, Jova. They're basically video file as they were made for the console. If they were lagging to begin with.
That's kind of a bit off. Like, typically with a re-release, the idea is to smoothen out the frame rate even on the cutscenes.
But again, if it's pre-rendered stuff, there's nothing you can do about it. To give, for example, an idea, I played it recently for checking. The PC version of the first Castlevania Lords of Shadow is in 60 frames for most of it, but some specific cutscenes, because they are pre-rendered instead of just using the in-game engine stuff, they're locked at 30 frames, so you get a bit of a whiplash, because of that. It's just sometimes there are some stuff that it's because it's just a video file and not something that was done properly in game, you cannot do really anything about it. It's kind of like let me put it also this way. It's kind of like how the FMVs in old PlayStation games that are tie-ins to Disney movies. Still would look crusty. In order to be quote unquote remade, it will have to have people use clips from the movie directly instead of actually remaking them.
It does admittedly make some sense, especially if this was designed for the PSP, that some stuff would have had to have been hardcode rendered into there. And I guess, to be fair, this is technically a re-release. It's not even like, a remaster. So
yeah, it's
an
just
emulation.
It's just emulation and close to a port, basically, as you can get.
It's basically a virtual console type service.
For the Kingpin.
Alright, these are the main enemies that you actually find. The smaller ones, which have I don't even know what's that supposed to be on their head, like a suction device, like a megaphone. I don't know. If I recall correctly, there is a skill point if you manage to get through this entire level by stealth killing everything that you can that the game allows you to do it. There are some sequences where the game forces you to forced combat in this, but for the most part you can actually get away with stealth, which as you can see, I'm basically not about to do. But it's one of those skill points that, if I recall correctly, it's the hardest to actually get for good reason.
Given how much this game seems to really, really love QuickTime events, I wonder if it's about they wanted to make all these cool animations, but because of how development for the PSP was, a lot of these core animations can only really be tied to QuickTime events.
It's mostly just for the takedowns, Other than that, most of the combat is done just like in any of the other Ratchet and Clank games.
Well, I say QuickTime events, but I'm kind of also including the rhythm sections there. I know those are technically different things, but you get what I mean. All the many uses of button prompts in the wake of, actual gameplay,
I
essentially.
don't know. Again, those three were the only major things that were happening, and even for other sections like the racing or any of the core fantasy sequences, you still have a more traditional gameplay usage.
Again, who knows, given how, well, downright weird this game is in execution. Again, not saying it's bad, but it's weird and definitely unorthodox, to say the least. Which isn't inherently a bad thing, it's just... Okay, assuming people were mainly mainline players, I could see them being very caught off guard with this. Now, don't get me wrong, in a lot of other game series, they wish that just being weird would be like the worst thing of their installment. As we've gone on to stay, in spite of there being, yes, black sheeps in the franchise, those black sheeps, none of which are full and through bad games. They have stuff that definitely makes them the weakest of the series, but they are arguably games you could enjoy enough in a vacuum. Yes, even the 2016 game.
Yeah, basically that's
Of
the
course.
usage of the Tangled by Incarnation to just jam mechanism. Even if you're dipped in molten metal, this vegetable clearly can sustain that. Just
By
with
that
it.
logic, couldn't we just attack any robot with this plant thing, including the big bads?
Shut up, that's why.
Yep.
As we are technically all mechanisms.
Again, I guess it's because, again, these are instead the big ones, while when it comes to the smaller robots, the Tangled by Incarnation just, deploys the carnivorous plants that eats them. So, there is that. Yeah, one thing that I will say, also, just to showcase what happens if you don't use the plant, is still doable, but you have to be quick on your feet, basically.
I see.
The one
What
thing
about when
that I
you're in
don't
this-
particularly like about this sequence in general is that because of the nature of a weapon, the Tangled by Incarnation cannot be used in repetition, in quick succession. That, for normal gameplay purposes, makes sense because you can use a weapon that it's not designed to spam, only with some intervals because it still needs to eat the enemies, a bit at a time. But when it comes to the gears, that basically means that you have to launch one, step on the platform, and then wait a bit until you can throw the weapon again, instead of being able to launch it another time immediately. I kind of wish they kind of made an exception for that, but alas.
Mm-hmm. It might be from you being a pro at this game, relatively speaking, but it seems like you have to go out of your way to actually fail those QuickTime events.
I'm just more used to them, as I showcased even in stuff like Azra's Wrath.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I mean, QuickTime events I've never found inherently a bad or even tough thing to contend with. It really comes down to how well they're programmed.
mm-hmm.
The problem is that there's some game gone.
Like give you an example of bad ones, despite everything, the first Bayonetta. The first Bayonetta actually had to rely on you being very reactive towards them. There are a couple of sequences where if you actually fail them, you basically are insta-killed and you need to restart from the previous checkpoint because they are in the middle of a specific encounter, which is, yeah.
I think what helps is if they at least give you enough of a window of time to be fair. The worst thing you can do for me as a QuickTime event is just straight up not work. Looking at you, Balan Wonderworld, expects you to be incredibly precise with not even a nanosecond allowed of being off, and sometimes even when you do get it right, the game for whatever reason
Doesn't
won't
register
register it as being right.
Does it
It's
also
because,
have input lag?
So like an NES game.
Does it
It's
also have
because-
input lag?
Okay,
From
not
what
that
I
I
can
can
surmise, not really.
not
but
really. It's more so the fact that the super quick time events are super duper precise, like to the fucking millisecond. And like we've said, if you fail even a single by a millisecond, you immediately fail the trophy, meaning the rest of the QTE is now rendered pointless. You just wasted like 3 minutes, basically.
And
as
the
a result
only
of
way
this.
to get to repeat that quick time event is to either beat the boss, which will require you going through another stage if it's a QT from the first stage of a level, or restart the level.
Because that's fun,
cow.
isn't it? It's just like, are you sure, Naka, that you made this game for kids? Because I feel like kids don't really have the patience to put up with this.
It's the big irony. In trying to make it simple enough for kids, he ended up making it arguably obtuse and too complicated in some ways, because he had to really bend over backwards to make it so that everything can be done with just one button, save for movement.
Okay, since I haven't played it, and I haven't even particularly seen videos about it, like does Rodea the Sky Soldiers also have similar problems?
No.
No,
Fortunately, Rodea is
this
really
Sky
good.
Soldier is so much better.
I recommend you check out Dark Lodge, the one review. He reviews both the Wii U shitty port as well as the proper good Wii version that Pro was screwed out of. Because the basic history of that is that Naka and his team were just making a Wii game. That was it. A Wii game. The problem is, Kadokawa, the publisher, they wanted a 3DS version to go along with it. So they gave the game for one of their own internal teams to port to the 3DS. The problem, the team took so fucking long making that 3DS port that by the time the port was ready, the Wii had been retired. So, okay, never mind. I guess we'll also have to have the 3DS port team also port their 3DS port to the Wii U as well. And all while this was going on, as you can imagine, Naka and his team were all wondering what the hell happened to their game.
So basically, get this, the 3DS, which was supposed to be a handheld version, suddenly became the main version by being ported up to Wii U. Try and wrap your head around that.
Yeah, and here's the problem: the 3DS and Wii U ports absolutely suck and completely miss the point of the vision of the original game. In fact, the Wii version too never was officially released. Instead, it had to do with just being a bonus disc on the Wii U version.
Yeah, that I remember.
So basically, fortunately, they did print a shit ton of them, so it's not like you can. Let me see how expensive it is on eBay. Actually,
My questioning, however, in all of this basically was, okay, if that is the case, why did Yuji Naka, basically made this much of a step backward with Balan instead?
Okay, Balan was basically...
Yes, I know that the real answer is he was secretly doing market speculation on a fucking Dragon Quest gacha game. How fucking specific does it have to be? It's not just about market speculation or about the franchise of Dragon Quest. No, on the specific gacha mobile game that has no relevance anymore in the West to begin with.
Weird.
Yeah.
But from what I can surmise, when it came to Balan Wonderworld, this was Yuji Naka trying to show that he still had the sauce. Now, okay, I'm going to go out on a bit of a limb here, essentially, but here's what I do recall. Balan Wonderworld is essentially Yuji Naka's answer to Keiji Inafune's Mighty No. 9, the game that's supposed to show why he is the quote-unquote father of Sonic. And what was Sonic very famous for back in the day? Being a fantastic platformer that really only used one button in addition to directional motion here and there. So
Much like
Yuji Naka apparently...
Much like Keiji Inafune, Naka took all the credit of creating Sonic, even though it wasn't just him. So Now, this is not the first time we've seen Yuji Naka apply that mentality. He technically applied it in the adventure games. Now, thankfully, there was enough pushback that obviously he had to have more than just a few buttons, but you see how a lot of moves kind of shared the same button? You know, stuff that got modded out by modders. Like Adventure 2 Battle.
What's the name? The move where you had to, take advantage of a line of rings that 9 times out of 10 doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yuji Naka's philosophy seems to be simplicity. Ergo, make a game that even your mother could play by having the control scheme be simple enough. It worked for Sonic in a lot of avenues. It did not work for Balan Wonderworld, a game that I still argue was trying more so to be Knights than Sonic, but I digress. But look, I'll just pretty much give out the usual checklist here and there. It's so bad that sometimes if you have a certain costume on, you can't jump. And you can't switch out of that costume if you don't have other costumes, so yeah, if you're stuck with just that costume, tough. Go die and start over.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, question, does it also give you motion sickness like Knights? Because that's the effect that I got by playing that game.
Well,
no, because for the most part, you won't be playing as Balan. No, it plays as the human gameplay from Knights, which is supposed to be more of a punishment. You only get to play as Balan by either getting a costume, which is a nightmare in and of itself to get, or with the Balan bouts, aka the quick time events, and
Yes,
as I
Pedro.
mentioned earlier, they suck.
To give to a more concise answer, here's the thing too. Like, Rodeo was developed by Probe, a lot of former Sonic Team developers who left with Naka from Sega. I mean, right? Whereas Balan was developed by Arzest, a developer who has a very, very bad track record.
I want to give credit to Arzest, though. This was more of a Mighty Number 9 situation where technically it was Yuji Naka calling the shots. Arzest just did what they were told, basically.
Oh, sure. That being said, they made Yoshi's New Island and Hey Pikmin, which is not a good track record pre-Balan, let's face it. So you have to wonder why Naka got them, of all people, to make his big 3D platformer.
I'm guessing because of Oshima.
Probably, but you can get Oshima on his own. You don't have, can't you? Like,
maybe again it was a case of just getting a team that happened to have Oshima with it. Two birds with one stone, essentially. Since, although I do find it weird that Square apparently did not provide just a little team of their own to help with Balan.
It's pretty clear to me that Square was just being, yes man with the tracks to provide the project going, and we're relying on Yuji Naka's name value, the brand name value to carry on. That was part of basically a part of their initiative at the time, where they also had hired Hideo Baba to make a game on his own, but that instead resulted in getting
nothing.
One trailer, and then he just left. I don't even know what he's doing anymore.
What the heck?
Days.
Why?
He's probably retired at this point. Yeah, that's the weird part. We were given no reason what happened. Like, was the game not going well? Like,
did he quit or something? Like, if it was going to be another balance situation, I guess there's a reason, but it's something that we might never know, Jova, basically.
It's weird because Hideo Baba does not strike me as the guy who just up and quit, so something must have really gone south there, but I digress. The weird thing is when it comes to Balan Wonderworld, though, Square were putting the pressure on Yuji Naka to do better. He said that Square told him, this is your last chance, and believe it or not, Balan Wonderworld is one of the rare cases where executive manhandling actually made that game better than it was supposed to be. Because before, we were going to get Dick Alfer's story. It was Square that pushed for the cutscenes to be added and the story. I don't know if Square were the one who pushed for the novel, but they were the ones who actually got cutscenes and so much as the semblance of a story. But
so we
yeah,
have
a lot
to
of that
thank
story
them
did
for
get pushed
the
to the novel.
farmer dancing meme. Got it.
Okay, I don't know if they were the ones who came up with the farmer dancing thing. That might have just always been a gameplay thing. All I know is that Square got us the cutscenes that try to tell a story.
The CGI scenes, those are done by Square's Visual Works department. In the meantime, I found a listing on eBay that's selling 5 sealed copies of the Wii U version, and yes, it even has the Wii version for only £90.95, which basically boils down to €29.73, which is a pretty fair price considering the game came out in 2011.
And they made sure that it includes the Wii copy.
Yeah. The thing about the Weaver, it even says here on the cover, bonus game inside. Yeah. The thing is, even though this was supposedly just a bonus thing, apparently they put it in on every single copy of the Wii U version that was
Now
printed.
by default.
It's not a limit. Apparently, it's not a limit. It was never a limited thing, Jova. Even though you'd think it would be. No, it was put in with every single physical Wii U copy. It seems.
It's kind of like how in Homefront Revolution, there's a hidden, a code for perfectly functional good port of Time Splitters 2 for no real reason, and that's basically the one reason people bought the game.
I do wonder if maybe they sensed that they were going to get some backlash regarding the Rhodia stuff, so they included that Wii copy to try and soften the blow.
Publishing is a very, very weird, type of company in terms of how they handle things. The one thing I particularly remember is how they handle stuff like Suda 51's game that he made for them, Lollipop Chainsaw. Then
God, yeah.
They're mostly in partner with From Software, which means that recently Sony acquiring Kadowaka means they probably might have a bit more control over that company, but it's just people speculating on that.
If they just released the Wii game as it was, instead of bothering with ports nobody asked for, maybe the game could have been a really decent at worst Wii hit. But no, Kadokawa completely fumbled the entire thing to the point where, and as you can imagine, the game sold terribly, and as a result, Probe closed down, and that's why Naka moved on to Square Enix.
Oh wait, no. Actually, Pedro, Probe technically didn't close down. No, Probe stayed open, but it apparently had only one member.
So what exactly is this one employee doing there?
I think that may have been Yuji Naka himself. I don't recall if that was verified on. I don't know about.
Maybe his job was to actually be in the building to prove, see, we exist.
I don't know if Probe is a thing anymore. I just remember that being a thing around the time of Balan Wonderworld. That yes, the word was that Probe was still technically a thing, but there was only one member.
Anyway, to mention about this specific segment, as your contact mentioned, Clank is stuck in this particular vault, and you cannot be spotted. This is a mandatory stealth section where you need to watch out and not be detected, and since you can't, since you need a disguise of an enemy, you cannot kill everyone in the room, unfortunately.
I noticed earlier you got a bit lucky where you didn't quite make a jump to a platform, but it counted it enough to let you get the animation for collecting the
titanium vault. Well, it was ledge grabbing. I basically was done technically with that.
The weird thing was The weird thing was just it didn't show you ledge grabbing. It just skipped to you getting the thing as you were sideways from the block thing. So it looked like the game was throwing you a bone there.
Possible.
It seems like you are correct, Joe, because from what I'm seeing here, right after Balan Wonderworld, Naka did manage to release one game called Shot 2048, whatever this is, under the Probe brand in December 2021. Remember, it was a few months after Balan released this. But after that, of course, we all know what happened to Naka, so no more games came out of Probe after this. So I guess Naka really is the one employee then.
I don't think he's technically reclused at this point because of how law regulations do work. But I think the accusations still remain. He's just waiting for the trial, I think.
Mm-hmm. At this point, his career is pretty much over. At this point, no company that's not out of their mind will hire him.
Oh, interestingly enough, you do get specific stealth takedowns just for these enemies alone. I guess it's because the way they're designed, but interestingly enough, because the game only recognizes the small ones and the big ones, but only these ones that are in the middle. So. Just letting you know.
I see. How peculiar.
Yeah, as noticed by the introduction, these are the specific robots that the Kingping has used to replace the guards of Sprocket. So
I do find it interesting that the game introduces the Kingpin that one level, but then scoots him up ahead.
Oh, well, no, as showcased, he was the one torturing the scientist in Ver Antonio. He's still part of a plot, don't worry.
Oh, I get that. It's just, I find it interesting that, okay, I assume he's the main big bad, but it's weird how they introduce him in that one level,
Trust
then
me,
give him
Drova,
this and that.
it will all make sense in a few parts from now.
Alright, then. Well, as it turned out, he's actually one of Clank's big brothers from the first scene we see in the first game, where Clank is one of the off robots.
Again, you just have to wait and see what happens.
Okay.
For the time being, we're almost at the end of a level, but let's just say that in order to spice up the gameplay style, there is something that happens at the end. Remember, as the intro of the level show, we are basically after the number one goon. Again, yeah, for the younger in the audience, you have to remember that for a long time the term was used just to describe henchmen instead of, someone that's very horny. So
It's like how boobs used to be used to describe idiots instead of,
birds.
well, Yes, birds, let's go with that. But, yeah, no,
Speaking
it's good
of
that
the head goon.
This is payback.
Oh yeah, if I recall correctly, in this particular cutscene the audio gets desynced, and that was a thing also in the original, but wait a minute.
That is not possible. What am I doing?
That was
good question.
Yeah, why was
Echo,
Clank
Tango,
recorded doing
arrive.
that?
Go, go, go. The porcupine has eaten the snowman.
That's code for something.
Yeah, so did the 007 movies did have this weird coding? I guess that's a no. Just to mention, this is the next section with the gadget bots. It's not the last, and the entire gimmick is that they're basically traveling through the inside computer of Sprocket and disabling the mainframe from the inside, and all the time they're basically having this gigantic reference to 2001: A Space Odyssey with the main computer acting like HAL 9000. Why? Parody. That's why. Shut up.
Honestly, I'm surprised it took for this series this long to do a 2001 reference.
Nexus, while not all the time, Nexus will actually try to remember that this is still supposed to be set in space and try to showcase a bit the dangers of that, but it's a more relatively superficial way. It's still supposed to be a comedy at the end of the day.
Okay, so that cutscene was a pre-rendered movie, like every single cutscene in this game is a pre-rendered movie, kind of like Size Matters. So yeah, that's why even without playing the original on the PSP, I can imagine that it was like that in the original hardware, because I mean it's a pre-rendered cutscene. How does that even from an emulation standpoint? That's one of the easier things to get done. You just play the movie file on and that's it. It's a movie. Oh, but I don't understand how that got. How did I not get caught doing playtesting? It's one of the game's cutscenes. You'd think somebody would tell High Impact Games, hey, this cutscene has the audio out of sync.
I don't know if it was a case potentially for the European version. Remember, this is the English European version. And instead the NTCS version, has that cutscene working a bit better. I cannot tell, to be honest.
Remind me, how long was European stuff using the PAL frame rate until...
That itself is not really a thing applicable to the PSP, but...
No.
But there still were occasions where, American versions run technically a bit better than the European versions, mostly because of also the fact that a couple of titles, since they're parent company did not had an European branch in terms of publishing, were handled by different small companies to save costs and have that done for marketing purposes, and not all the time this resulted in good ports. Case in point, not for the PSP but for the 3DS, because at that point they were not being bought yet by Sega, Atlus had to rely on companies like Ghostlight to release a bunch of the European ports of the 3DS games they were making, and most of them did not actually work. Yeah, they needed to be patched, and those are basically versions that even on emulations like Chitra do not really work much as intended. And I don't know why, because it's not, again, Atlus was not even a company that was particularly caring about translating multi-5 back then, but the thing that they started doing with Sega. So I don't know, what was the deal, because that was either a case of just porting the English script, the actual coding of the American version for the European 3DS, so I have no idea what happened there, but it did. So I wonder if something similar happened here.
It's the thing is, Joe, remember, the reason the PAL refresh rate was a thing was because of televisions,
German televisions, yeah.
Obviously,
so that wouldn't apply to a handheld.
No, handhelds have their own screens, which means that that whole concept doesn't really exist in handhelds.
It's weird how it still found a way to affect handheld stuff, but obviously in a much different way.
It boils down to who people screwing up the European versions, like they just said, because of incompetence more than anything.
I can't believe for a case like this, it might have been potentially because the cutscene has to be played in a lot of different languages. One thing that I haven't shown is the fact that when you boot up the game, you do get the language selection, and there are something like 16 to choose from. Yeah, it's not even the average multi-5. Even back then, Sony had a reputation for trying to have voice acting in, not just a multi-5 European language, and not even ones that you would think immediately that you would do, say, Russian, for example. But there is stuff like, for example, Swedish in this, or, Pedro's natural Portugal instead of Brazilian one. So... So again, it's also the fact that the game has to contain the voice clips for those versions too, and it has to basically have a separate video file for those. That's also probably why the quality is technically a bit low, because there has to be all these different versions.
Yeah, there is this sort of thing where we would also take into mind that some of the resolution probably didn't look as good as it does on this version too for the PSP.
It's kind of like how the original Crash Team Racing for this European release completely had to completely cut away the extra feature of the illustrations, because there was no space anymore left in the disc for the European version containing also the other languages. Which, honestly, it's kind of hilarious, because back then, voice acting for PlayStation games in my country was kind of a joke, so we could have easily just kept the English one and just have the text and be done with
I actually find that extra ironic, given how... Look, Crash scripts were already kind of bare bones, but CTR is probably one of the lightest of the scripts of that series too.
Oh, I'm not talking also about bad translation or anything. It's literally about the quality of the voice acting.
Oh, okay, yeah, that too. What I'm talking is, I find it ironic that apparently it took up so much space. I'm guessing for CTR they went above and beyond and gave more voice acting, but I would kind of argue that out of all the plots, CTR would be one of the ones that they would emphasize translating.
I'm trying
the
to
least.
think, and compared to the platforming trilogy, it does have a lot more voice clips if I had to think about it, because it
No,
has to count every single racer which has its set of different voice clips and the ones that are used in the story mode.
Oh. Okay. So they included the in-game stuff. I was wondering if it was one of those translations where it's mainly just the cutscene
Oh,
stuff.
no. Okay, like I said, it's still wonky because of the delivery, but yes, they had to do it, which leads to hilarious results. Where, for example, one particular phrase that Tiny Tiger has to say, I don't remember how it is in English, because the way they translated and the delivery of a VA, it had to be sped up, and it sounds almost incomprehensible as a result.
Oh my goodness.
Again,
Well, okay.
it's the definition of a product of its time, and only starting with the PS2. It's one of the reasons why only the first Metal Gear Solid got a voice acting in my language, but starting with 2, they just kept the English, because Konami thought, yeah, let's just give that is for the better. And yeah, I concur on that.
I guess that's the ultimate surprise for me that they actually went to that length for a Crash game of all things. Like again.
Crash and Spyro, mostly because again the publisher Universal wanted to probably boost the market for European release. So
That is true. This was around the time when Crash and Spyro were kind of on top of the world.
Like we said,
so...
the quality just sucked. To give you an idea, for some reason, whoever was the voice director did not got the memo that Spyro, name is actually pronounced that way with the Y. So instead, everyone, in that original trilogy keeps calling him Speedo, and not even just normally, but in a very high-pitched manner for some reason. It's one of those reasons why I actually prefer the Reignited trilogy, because by that point we actually got actual proper voice acting that actually fixes a lot of the scenes.
Yeah, I can definitely get that. Like, standards thankfully have raised, especially in different dubbing.
Same goes technically for the Crash trilogy. Go on.
Yeah, but could you imagine if they did that with a series? We'd have Crash Bandicoot,
Cash Bazooka, yes.
or Sonic.
Remember, Dweebs, don't forget the power-up when you acquire Bonus Bob.
Yeah. or May Ryo.
What a wild time it was. It's like the Wild West. You appreciate some of the old stuff, but you get why it could never last that way.
But again, that's basically one of the reasons why probably there wasn't enough space on CTR's disc. Sure, it might not be that much for now, but it kind of makes sense for the time of the original PlayStation, when disc size was already kind of a novelty thing.
And I'll give him credit. I can understand prioritizing the translation over the extra art. Now, that art is pretty great.
Yeah, again, I argue, it would have been a case of would have preferred that, but that's just me.
I definitely get preferring it. I'm just
in case you're wondering, that kind of wonky voice acting technically has its nostalgic fans, but only in an ironic fashion, mind you. Not.
Yeah.
No, I think it's worth noting because unlike in when you think of stuff like say a lot of people being nostalgic. Yeah, no, sorry, Al. Discount Al. Unlike a lot of things like say nostalgia for potential bad localization, this one instead is just a case of haha, it was funny back then, but that's kind of it.
Yeah, it's like if ever you see something replicating that, it's because they're going for that gag. Like say with oh god, what's that game that's basically Zelda CD? I even got back.
Yeah,
Zelda's
I forgot its
original
name, but I
actress.
know what you mean because it was actually done by the same guy who made those ports, PC decompiled ports of the Wand of Gamelon and Faces of Evil versions. If I recall correctly, they also got back the actual voice actors of Zelda and Link for that one. Not the one of King Arcadian. I do wonder if he's still alive even or not, but hopefully he's just retired. But no, they had those two along with a couple of people like Vinny from Vinesauce or Easter eggs and stuff.
Was that game good?
It's fine. Again, if you're in the joke of playing something tied to the Zelda CDI games, that's basically up your alley. The controls are not as polished as you may hope in terms of quality of life improvement of, fixing a lot of the problems that the CDI games had, but, it could have been worse, if I have to be honest. So
I kind of get it, it seems like the kind of game where, you know what you're getting into, but it's going to be tough to actually make that sort of game, good.
honestly, the worst one of a bunch that, my country got in terms of, bad voice acting conversion is Legend of Dragoon, which again, like I said in our commentary of Lost Odyssey, having actual Japanese traditional RPGs voice acted in my country, not necessarily translated in text, but voice acted in my country, it's an absolute rarity. But the most recent example would be Final Fantasy XVI.
Thanks, boys. I owe you one.
All in a day's work.
It was a setup. Somehow they made it look like I robbed the vault.
Really? Are you okay?
Yes, I am fine. But if I am unable to locate the true culprits, I'm going to be in hot water with the Galactic Police.
Well, we've tracked the Kingpin to a spaceship graveyard at the edge of the galaxy. If you hurry, he may still be
Of
here.
course it's a spaceship graveyard.
That's what we're going next part. Just to conclude, because for the moves, they translated them in a way that sounded weird. Most of them are fine, but to give you an idea, the resident monk, Hashel, has a particular move, I don't remember, I think it's called Fatal Strike in the original, but because in the original Japanese he has Shine, which means die, someone translated the move as just die. Not even, dying hit or something, just the verb to die, basically.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird as shit, but I'll talk more about if we ever get to that game. For the time being, we're going next part to the spaceship graveyard, so see you for that.
See you then.